Hello again, everyone. I'm Dick Stockton, and welcome to Stockton. You know, as a play-by-play guy, one of the things I miss is the chance to talk to people one-on-one. Now, during a game, of course, all the focus is on the play, on the field or court, and I really don't get a chance to interview or just talk to people. But with this podcast, that's just one of the things I get to do, talk one-on-one with guests. And I'm not talking about some post-game short-form manner, but instead, I get to go in depth with whomever I can connect with. And that's what Stockton is all about. It's also about stories, insights, observations, and opinions on topics in and around the world of sports that I've accumulated in my more than 40 years in the business. Plus, it's just good fun. Another bonus is that I also get a chance to connect with all of you, and that means I want to hear from you. First of all, subscribe to Stockton on iTunes, and as always, leave me a review because your opinion matters. Secondly, if you have an opinion on something you hear in an episode, or maybe there's a topic you'd like me to cover, or if you just want to say hello, then here's how you can go about it. Send an email to info@stocktonpodcast.com. Once again, the email is info@stocktonpodcast.com. Or you can always connect with me on Facebook or Twitter at Stockton Podcast. Now, before we get to today's guest, I want to remind you that I'm going to wrap up each of these podcasts with something I like to call Taking Stock. It's where I'll give you my take on one specific topic or news item worthy of a closer look. That's Taking Stock, coming up a bit later. But first, as I mentioned, one of the things that really excites me about doing this podcast is the chance to go one-on-one with people. And in this week's podcast, I'm pleased to sit down with a Super Bowl champion, a 9-time Pro Bowl selection, guy who was a strong safety, voted one of the most feared tacklers in NFL history, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer and Denver Bronco, who was included in both of those teams' rings of honor. A former partner of mine at Fox and a wonderful gentleman. I count him as one of the great people I have met in the world of sports. And now, he is the general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. He is none other than John Lynch.
What's up, my man?
I should be asking that question. Hey, John, you know, we all know how we prepare for games. Whether you're working with Kevin Burkhardt on the number 2 broadcast, which you left to go to San Francisco, and when you work with me, tell me if you can do this. Tell me the exact time the light went on when you said, hey, wait a second. What about this?
Well, you know, I think Dick, that's, I think the exact, it was during a conversation with Kyle Shanahan, and he and I had met together. He had met with our crew as we had done their divisional playoff win against the Seattle Seahawks. They beat Green Bay the next week, and I gave him a call to congratulate Kyle, and a conversation that started as a congratulations. At that point, Kyle was up for a number of jobs. San Francisco had started to zero in on him, and we started talking about that, and he was picking my brain in terms of, because he knows I'm out around the league, and saying, what do you think about this guy in an assistant role? What do you think about this guy as a coordinator? And so we started like that. I think he liked, the information. He and I have always had a really good relationship. I played for his father, but, more so it developed by doing games and being in these production meetings. And so we just had a good conversation. Somewhere in that conversation, it came to, hey, would you ever consider doing this? And I said, well, Denver had talked to me about doing it. Elway had 5 years ago, but there really wasn't a role, and I was happy doing what I was doing. And so I said, look, in the right situation, I'd consider anything. And that, I think I would. And that was it. We kept talking for a while. And then about a half hour later, Kyle called back and said, hey, would you really consider doing this? Because I can't stop thinking about it. And I said, well, I guess I would. And he said, well, I'm going to have Jed York call you. And Jed York is our owner. And next thing you know, I'm on the phone with Jed York. And I got approval from my wife that Linda, that I could pursue it a little further. And next thing you know, I'm up at Jed York's house, sitting down with he and his wife and talking about the opportunity. And the next day, we're off to Atlanta to sit down with Kyle Shanahan. He had one day where he could interview, and they interviewed 3 GMs. And so and by that Sunday, that was a Friday, by that Sunday, I was hired as the general manager. So it happened very fast. It happened very organically. And here we are.
I love your sense of adventure. You have no fear trying new things. A lot of people wouldn't do this. New changes are part of life. So was it when you first approached Linda, what did you think she was going to say?
Well, when you just said, I love your sense of adventure, I think my wife might have a different perspective. She was saying, and she's warming up. She's super excited. And I tell you, I'm blessed because I've always had, I'll never forget in free agency, I was worried about where do I take my family? I need the perfect spot for my family. And Linda said, you find the best football situation. We will adjust, that kind of thing. And so she's always given me that freedom. When I hit her with this one, I think it hit her hard because the broadcast life, I'm gone a lot, but then in an off season, I'm hers and she's mine. And, we get to take walks during the day. And she just said, listen, I can see you're excited. So I think you should follow your heart. And, I said, hon, this can't be a me decision. This has to be a we decision. And it has been. I think still having said that, just being completely honest, every now and then she'll say, what did you do? We had a good life. We were living in San Diego. The kids are all set, but all of my kids and Linda could see the excitement that I had, the challenge. I like a good challenge, and this certainly is that. And so they're very supportive. I've been, while they're finishing school, I've been up here now 3 weeks, and I'm going home on weekends to see them because I just can't be apart from them. But we're working long, long hours, and she's up here today, and so I've got a big smile on my face. And I'll forever be blessed that she allows me to have that sense of adventure that you were talking about.
Well, you're a great husband and a great father. I know your family, and it goes both ways. So she's been great, you've been great, and that's why I think you've got a model family from what I've seen in all of my years. And I was wondering whether people who have done broadcasting, and I knew that a lot of people who have done this and then go into that say, I needed to have a win. I didn't get that excitement or the disappointment in my belly just doing games. Was that ever a situation with you?
Dick, I think you could attest to it more than anyone. I loved what I was doing in the broadcast world. I try to tell people that it wasn't like a thing where I was miserable doing the broadcast. I loved my time with you. We have fun. We go to dinners. We meet with people. I found it very fascinating. So I was consumed with being the best I could. What would happen, like at the end of each year, I'd go back and just like a lot of people do at year's end of whatever they do, you kind of take inventory. And I would do that each year. And I think I would, because John Elway put this in my head by inviting me in their building, that was always there. And as I would take inventory, I'd say, okay, my family, they're doing outstanding. Things are great. My kids are well placed in school. And, Linda and I, we're doing great. My faith, I feel real good about where that's at. I always want to get better, but, and all those things. And then I would come down to my career. I'm loving it. I'm moving up in the world. But there was always like a but, and it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't all year long. It wasn't every day. It was when I would do that evaluation. And what I came to know was that, and I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about it, but every now and then I would say, that but is the scoreboard. That's the one thing I missed in broadcasting. You and I would do a great broadcast, and we'd fist bump and say, great job. And then it was about making our plane and going home. And I think just as much as the wins, it's also the agony of the losses and how hard you take those that is all consuming, and that's what you miss. I mean, camaraderie, people talk about missing a locker room. We have great camaraderie out on broadcast crew. You get 40 some odd people putting on a broadcast each week, and you're busting each other's chops, all that fun stuff that you do in a locker room. I still got that. But I think truly what you do miss is that the scoreboard, winning or losing. And so I guess that's what brought me back.
We're talking with John Lynch, who's the new general manager of the San Francisco 49ers, who has known nothing but success in his life and now charts new waters. But you're in a perfect spot, in my opinion, John. The San Francisco 49ers are a proud, once hugely successful team on the field, winners of many championships. The fans are down, and rightly so. What an opportunity for you and Kyle.
Well, that's what I saw, to be honest, and I think it helped me immensely. The fact that I played college football at Stanford, close by, and Denny Green was my coach for the first 3 years. He had a lot of 49ers ties. He had been a longtime assistant here. When he left for the Minnesota Vikings, they went and got this guy that was a decent coach named Bill Walsh, and so I got exposed to what the 49er way was all about. And that's when they were winning championships. And it was a great time to be up here. And I saw 49er fans. And when Bill was our coach, it wasn't, it was a regular occurrence to look over and see Ronnie Lott and Joe Montana out at our practice. They would come on their field and work with us. And so I got to feel that, and I knew what a proud organization. I mean, they got 5 Lombardis that I walk by every day in the lobby here. That's pretty special. So is it down? Yeah, it's down the last couple of years, but it wasn't long ago. They were in a Super Bowl, and I kind of like challenges, and the challenge is that it's down, and we got to get it back. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions that the ownership doesn't, isn't all about winning, and I couldn't disagree more. The one thing I found with every conversation with Jed York is that's all he wants to do. He wants to do it the right way, and he wants to win. And Kyle Shanahan, our head coach, and I both felt that. We had visions that were very aligned as to how to do that, and it's been even better than I thought here the first 3 weeks in terms of coming in and trying to. It's a big task, but starting to create that culture that we know is needed to turn this place back around to being on top.
I wanted to ask about a couple of things here. First, you worked with John Elway, a big influence for you, and what did he say about the real difficulties of the job of general manager? Did he ever get into that and say, I'll tell you what's really problematic, in this job? Did he ever get into that with you?
What he spoke more about, Dick, all the time was, look, this isn't rocket science. I think people try to make it more than it is. Football, how to lead, people. All those things are what he encouraged me. And he used to, when I'm saying that, he used to, 5 years ago, he brought me in their organization to do about 3 weeks worth of draft work. Before that, he used to have me write reports on, say, hey, do the safeties this year. I want a different set of eyes, and so I would work hard. He'd give me the film, and I would do that. And I love it because I love football. So, but as this opportunity came up, he's one of the first people I called, and he was fired up because he used to give me a hard time about broadcasting, and he loved what I was doing. But he would say, like, at the end of the day, what are you doing? You gotta try to compete for world championships and all those things. So, he's been nothing but encouraging. He did help me though, like tangibly, in terms of saying you gotta find these people in these roles that people you trust, people that have your back, and people that you believe in and see football in a very similar light. So I went to the Broncos and got a guy in Adam Peters who's a really up and coming. He was the college director there. He's our senior vice president of player personnel, and I was able to get him, and that was huge for me because he's a very astute evaluator of talent. He's been doing this a long time with the Patriots and with the Broncos, has a great pedigree. And then, the final piece was a guy, Martin Mayhew, who I had played with, but then had been the general manager of the Detroit Lions. And so I think to have Martin and Adam there to kind of have my back and that I can run things by, and two guys that I trust immensely. And then you come in a building and you see, there's a lot of really talented people here already. And so it's I don't want to create the impression that, hey, we've got this, I've got it all under control, that I've figured this thing out. But I can tell you that things are operating smoothly, and we're having a ton of fun. We've been in draft meetings for the last 3 weeks, and it's been outstanding.
Now, do you and Kyle see a style of player that might resemble the player you were? You know, you were hard-hitting, clean, total team performer, that kind of thing. In other words, the kind of player that you want.
Yeah, I think those are a lot of the qualities. Kyle, one thing I loved about the Atlanta Falcons and their offense, they had speed all over. And, so he believes in speed. I know from playing that speed, nothing threatens you like speed. So we want to create a real fast team. But the other qualities that we believe so much, we want guys who love football. When you talk about character, you can't go get a bunch of choir boys. There's a bunch of good people in this league, though. You know that, Dick. You go around and see it. And we so often hear about the negative stories, but there's so many guys doing great things in their community. So a lot of those exist, and we need to go find those. But you want tough, you want resilient. You just watched this last Super Bowl. You talk about resiliency. The New England Patriots down 25 points but never gave up. So those are the type of players with great grit and fortitude. Those are the type of players that we're looking for. And Kyle and I are very much in agreement. And that's something that we learned through these production meetings. And now we're doing it together, working as a team.
Oh, it's interesting. People talk about talent and how good a player is, but sometimes the lack of loving the game is missing. And people say, well, what does that mean? And I know that in many years that I've covered football, we would bring in, I remember a top wide receiver from the Washington Redskins. And we'd say, what team did you root for when you were a young kid? And he says, I didn't even watch football. I never watched NFL. I'd never been in this stadium. I just play football. There's a difference.
Yeah, and I would tell you from my experience of being around the game, both as a player and as a broadcaster, it's very few and far between. I played with a couple people. I think I could, two or three that come to mind that really didn't love football. They happened to love the money or the fame that came along with it, but typically that doesn't work, and they were immensely talented, so they got by on that. But because it's a tough and it's a hard sport and it hurts, all those things, I think it's just a sport where it's got to be something you live and breathe. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a great family life and you can't have other things in your life that are very important to you, but it just means that it's always on your mind. What can I do to get better today? Those are the type of guys that we're looking for.
Now, I've had two partners who became general managers. Matt Millen was the first, and he admitted that he didn't know a lot about other parts of football, John, and linebacker and offensive line. And I would have hired Matt because I worked with him for about 8-9 years as an offensive line coach or a linebacker coach without question. You know, you two are so different in so many ways. And I always felt that when he left and he had his own story, whether he was cut out to be a general manager, I think there's a way, a personality, a way of being and the way you are. So I don't think just because one had that experience that means that's the way it's going to be for everyone.
Well, first of all, I have a lot of respect for Matt Millen, and I can tell you this, that I can't wait to talk to him. They're long hours right now, and we're in draft meetings from 8 to 5. We're hiring a staff. I get pulled in and out. I'm doing other things around the building, and I've been here. I've been living here and down the street at the hotel, and that's it. So phone calls back have been tough, but it was very heartwarming. Just yesterday, I came in, and one of the messages was, John, it's Matt Millen. Hey, I want to talk to you. You're going to do great, and I'd love to help you out and tell you some of the things where maybe I went wrong and some of the things that I think I did right. And so I can't wait to get on the phone with Matt. I think it's so classy that he would reach out.
It's great of him.
I think the other side of that is there's John Elway, who's been very good at this, along with a guy like Ozzie Newsome, who have excelled at this, some of the premier franchises, and they've done as good a job as anyone. And so, it didn't work out for Matt, but there's a lot of circumstances. I can't wait to talk to him about that.
You mentioned the Super Bowl and Bill Belichick, and I was impressed with the fact that he never lost focus. The team was down, and he'd have that pen writing things. And briefly tell us again about your experience with him, even though you never actually played a game with the Pats.
Well, I had played I was drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, played 11 years. I went to Denver in 2004, and that was the first time I had been a free agent, and I almost went to New England. It was very close. And ultimately, I guess I can tell this story now that their doctors, they didn't flunk me on my physical. I was coming off a neck surgery. They just said it's very risky to bring John in, and they already had Rodney Harrison. It was going to be Rodney Harrison and I playing safety together. That would have been fun, and it would have been a ton of fun. But we were very close to getting that deal done, and their doctors just kind of gave it it's very, very risky, and so we both moved on, and I was happy with Denver. And but Bill and I kind of developed a relationship, as I did with Mr. Kraft during that recruiting process. They recruited me hard. They really wanted it to happen. So 4 years later, after 4 real productive years in Denver, I left camp in Denver in 2008. It would have been my 16th year, and Bill Belichick started calling me every day. And after about 14 days, I went out there and I played for Bill for about 3.5 weeks. At that point, I had realized that I had shut it down in my heart, and I was always, that love of the game, that live it, breathe it. I had always been that guy, and you can lose that. And I think the 2 weeks I took off from Denver camp, I was at home with my family, and that's exactly what happened. And so I was real honest with Bill, and he couldn't have handled it more classy. And he and I developed a friendship. And so he's a guy. I can tell you one of the first calls I received was from Bill Belichick, despite the fact that he had the Super Bowl going on, and we had a great conversation. And he's people like that, you soak up that knowledge, and I always did. Even in those 3.5 weeks, some of the most impactful lessons that I learned about life and football happened in those 3.5 weeks. And there's a reason he's so successful. He has real clear philosophies on how you do things, and he is. I just watching him in that Super Bowl, just what you were speaking to. There was no panic. There was constant communication on the sidelines, and what they were doing, they were making adjustments, and that's what this game's all about. So it was he's a guy that I think every general manager should sit back and study.
A few more questions for John Lynch, who's general manager of the San Francisco 49ers, who goes from one meeting to another and has taken the time to talk to us today. We're really grateful about that. I was thinking of Kyle Shanahan, and the Falcons lose the Super Bowl, and I remember back in my earlier career when the Baltimore Colts lost to the New York Jets in Super Bowl III, and one of their top defensive assistants was Chuck Noll. And the next day, Chuck Noll accepted the job as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just like right after that, the next day, Kyle Shanahan sealed the deal with the 49ers, your partner there. And we know what Chuck Noll did, and maybe Kyle Shanahan will follow the same route.
Well, I sure hope so, because Chuck Noll was pretty darn good. I think one of the most underrated coaches this league's ever seen. I mean, he didn't like the spotlight, and so he was never mentioned with the Lombardis and all that. But you look at his track record and the players he developed, and I feel like I know Chuck Noll very well, and I don't, because Tony Dungy was very influential in my career. He was my coach in Tampa, and he was raised under Chuck Noll, and that would be incredible if Kyle, but I think Kyle's got a lot of the traits. Kyle Shanahan is, what I think most highly of him is he had a dad who was an excellent coach, won a couple championships, and so Kyle soaked in all that information from him, and he knew early on this is what he wanted to be. And so he soaked in all that information, and then he became a coach at a very young age, but people identified that he was extremely talented, and he's kind of formed his own philosophies. And I think, I thought this year, I was on record, you can go back, check the broadcast, that I thought he was the catch of this hiring cycle, and that was in my former world as a broadcaster, and I still believe that. I just think he's so well equipped for this opportunity. He's going to be great at it, and I can't wait for everything just to keep going, and can't wait for that first game, because I just think he's going to grow into this role and just have a wonderful career as a head coach.
And, both of you are partners. I know I've heard some of the interviews you've done. A lot of the questions are about control, who has the ultimate decision. And I know for a fact that's not always the best situation to have. And I think you both go in as first-time partners, coach, general manager, first time you're in it together.
Yeah, and I think Jed York did a great job. We did a great job of all talking in our conversations. We want this to be a true partnership. And our contracts reflect that. They're both 6 years long, which is a long, long time. So Jed made a great commitment to us. The division of roles very much reflects that. And so that's something that Kyle and I craved and wanted. It's something I've seen. Dick, you do the same thing I used to do. You go up to places that are successful, and I think it's very clear why they are. There's talented, smart people who are working in the same direction. You go to places that aren't, and you've got the coach coming up to you and saying, hey, if I had any players, we'd be worth something. And then you got the general manager saying, hey, I got all the players, but if these guys could coach them up, that's not what we want. We want to be more like guys in our division, the Seattle Seahawks, where John Snyder and Pete Carroll, when you meet with them, they speak the same language, and everyone's working in the same direction. It's hard to win in this league, and it's really hard if you don't have that. And I feel very strongly that we have that, and we're creating that foundation so that it's sustainable and lasting.
I've got one last question for you, John, and I think I know you well enough I can ask this. When we talked previously about the Hall of Fame, and all of us who know you were rooting for you to get in, what was it like, though, being busy with all the things with your new job and also waiting to hear about this great individual honor? Tell me, what were the feelings you had there?
Well, it was like the ultimate distraction because, as we had talked about, I've never tried to let that consume me. But when you're down in Houston at the Super Bowl and you're going to these Hall of Fame luncheons and banquets and cocktail deals, they've done a great job now putting those events on. But then it starts to hit you. This really could happen. And, I could tell you that, it was apparently very close. It didn't happen, but I think as tough as it was, because I thought that this was the year, I had other things to worry about and a lot of other things to worry about. So I haven't thought about it much since, and we'll just keep on going. It's like keep going back until it does happen.
We all know, John, if it's meant to happen, it will happen, right?
Right.
We both know
That's
that.
Right.
Right. Well, John, I believe that there are only 4 people, and you mentioned a couple of them, who played the game in their respective sport, like you, brilliant in what you did on the field, and then became successful general managers or team leaders. You mentioned John Elway, of course, who is close to you, Ozzie Newsome. The other 2 are Steve Yzerman, the great hockey player, and Jerry West. I hope you're the 5th.
Well, I plan on calling all those guys. You just gave me another idea. I appreciate it.
John, thanks so much for being with us. I can't wait to meet up with you personally again, and best of luck in your new role.
Thanks so much, Dick.
Take care. Now it's time for Taking Stock. As I mentioned at the outset, this feature will come at the end of my podcast and will reflect an opinion on a specific topic that may or may not have any connection with the subject of the podcast you just heard. It can and will be about anything, and I welcome your thoughts and opinions as well, and you can do that by sending an email to info@stocktonpodcast.com. Well, today's Taking Stock does have a correlation with today's guest, John Lynch. It's something I know he'd like to be facing in his new career sooner than later. It's the Super Bowl. Now, I have never been one to call for a change in rules just because of a particular event or happening in a sport that may be different than what we've known. Otherwise, you find yourself chasing your tail, in effect, constantly changing to fit the latest event. I don't know how you felt watching that great Super Bowl in Houston, the most thrilling ever in my book, but when it came time for the coin flip in overtime, I was hoping each team would get a chance to move the ball regardless of whether the team winning the toss would score a touchdown, thus ending the game. We all know the overtime rules. If a team kicks a field goal, the other team has a chance to extend the game by also kicking a three-pointer or winning the game outright with a touchdown. Also, a defensive score would end it as well. But when the Patriots won the toss and scored the game-winning TD on one drive, I felt a bit cheated that I would never see Matt Ryan and that fabulous Falcons offense get a chance to score a touchdown as well. The game was so great, I was saying, hey, give Atlanta an opportunity now to do the same. If they do, the game goes on. If they don't, hail to the Patriots, who we hailed anyway. You could argue the Falcons' job was to stop Tom Brady, something they didn't do effectively, giving up 31 unanswered points. And according to the current rules, you'd be correct. But didn't you want to see a possible counterpunch in that game? Well, I did. Okay, in the regular season, the rules as they now are work. But in the playoffs, where the game only ends when there is a winner, it could go on and on. Let's give both teams the ball. How exciting would that have been? Patriots go down and score a touchdown. And now Matt Ryan and company have to do the same. Can the Patriots stop them again? So let both teams get a chance to score. It's for the World Championship. It kind of evens the playing field. And that's my taking stock for today's podcast. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Once again, my thanks to San Francisco 49ers General Manager John Lynch for being a guest on this week's episode. A reminder to go to iTunes and be sure to subscribe to the Stockton Podcast and leave a review. And also a reminder to email me your thoughts and opinions at info@stocktonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@stocktonpodcast.com. Want to thank my producers, Peter Lyon and Sarah Gurton, and our sound engineers, Scott Person and Pat Keogh, for their help with our episodes. Stockton is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcast for curious people. I'm Dick Stockton. So long, everyone.